This summer is going to be quite a summer for writer Glenn Plaskin, kind of born and bred in Buffalo, has written, of course, the book Horowitz, and we have him on from time to time. Sometimes he's outrageous, sometimes not. We'll find out this morning. But as I said, many things coming out in print. June 15th in Ladies' Home Journal, an interview with Senator Edward Kennedy. Then in July, in M Magazine, a special interview with the founder of CBS, William Paley. In August's Cosmopolitan, interview with NBC President Grant Tinker. And then September, Lena Horne and Family Circle. A lot of people.
You make me sound so interesting, but I have no peach pie recipes, no household tips for anybody, so I guess
We were talking about this during the break, Glenn. You do interviewing for print, and I do interviewing for television. And there's a technique, I guess, that's involved. But for instance, the people that you talk to are all these famous people and sometimes unapproachable people. How do you get set up for the interview to begin with?
You mean, how do you get the interview?
Yeah, because I'm sure that they're asked by everyone. And, how do you get them to give you that interview?
Well, for instance, with William Paley, who founded CBS in 1928, I had an audition interview. I was told to come and meet him in his office, and he just sort of looked me up and down, and as you can see from the picture, he's a very sort of a lionized kind of figure. And I tried to be I gave him my book as a present, and you try to be humorous and off the cuff and act a little dumb so they don't think you're going to do anything that would upset them, and then you hope that, and then he gave the interview. And what's funny is I went in reading all about him, and I respect him very much because he did found CBS. He brought to the airways Jack Benny, Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby.
Well, and Edward R. Murrow, the greats, Walter Cronkite, all are his brainchild.
And so you read everything like that, and then you go and you meet him and you expect this wonderful interview. And because he's 84 years old, it was, I think at that point in his career, he's trying to keep his reputation intact. And it's something very funny happened. After I finished the interview, he really said very little about anything, which made me very discouraged. And I went home and I said, well, I'm going to have to interview other people. One of the other people was Henry Kissinger. I had a terrible cold one day, and I was in bed asleep, 2 in the afternoon, and the phone rings. This is Henry Kissinger. I said, oh, my God, I don't even have a pencil in bed. And you don't put Dr. Kissinger on hold. So I ran to get a pencil, and we did a little interview on the phone, and I have to cancel call waiting. That is the curse of mankind. You know, call waiting where you get
you heard the
click.
little beep while you're on?
What can you do? Oh, will you hold on a minute? And then
you didn't have to put Henry Kissinger on hold, did you?
I did, actually.
Oh, no, Glenn.
I did, yeah.
Was he polite about it?
And the point is that after I'd interviewed Henry Kissinger and Irene Selznick and a couple of other people, it was only then that the article began to sort of come alive, because you could get Paley saying one thing, countering it with Henry Kissinger saying another.
In the article, you say certain things. In fact, you talk about he was a great womanizer, William Paley was, and he was very devoted to his wife at the same time.
And I said to him, I understand you love women. He said, I'm not going to talk about that. I said, oh, come on, what woman have you admired? And he said, I'm not going to tell you. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally he said, okay, I admired Eleanor Roosevelt, which is a very safe answer. And it's very frustrating because you leave and you thought, oh, my God, I got a lousy interview. So what you have to do is really rely on the other people. And
what about Edward Kennedy? He has been interviewed by, it seems like, everyone, and he's been the focus of so much media attention. How do you bring something new to the subject that all the world wants to know about?
I don't know how you do it. I wanted to do a very personal interview, not a political one. And I went into his house, and I think we have a picture of the house, and it was this enormous pink and yellow living room in Virginia. And apparently it was the first time any journalist had been allowed in the house to do this kind of interview. And we did it over dinner. We had lamb, and it was a nice... And after dinner by the fire, he was very casual, and he began talking about his brothers. One thing that I found particularly poignant, his youngest son has asthma, very bad asthma. And he nearly died of it last Thanksgiving, and he was unable to go on the family's trip to Ethiopia. And when he began talking about his son's asthma and how he would have to stay up all night and administer injections, it was very moving, I thought.
Being an interviewer can be a difficult position, too, because I would think that you want to come away with a great story. But when you get in there and they take you in, for instance, you had dinner with the Kennedys, that you must be torn if you get a great scoop or you get something very personal, that if you put it down on paper, they're going to say, why, that was private, and now I don't trust you anymore?
I think that it can be very incestuous to become friends with somebody and then try to interview them. And the funny thing is that I used to think, oh, Kennedy likes me, or this one likes me. It's not that they don't like me. But if you want to do a good job, I don't think you should become friends with them. And number two is, I often ask myself, why do I leave these interviews depressed, which I often do? And I think it's because, for instance, to have dinner with the Kennedys, you're very in. But at the same time, you're not in, you're out. They really don't.
Well, they distrust you because they're afraid of what you might put in print.
And the way they look at you, and you know, and you want to enjoy them, you want them to like you, but at the same time you realize that that's not possible. And I suppose I'll get more used to it as I go. You know?
What's happening with Katharine Hepburn? The last time we talked to you, she had kind of taken you under her wing, and you were having tea with her.
Oh my. She loves cookies. She loves sweets. And my grandmother makes, without a doubt, the best so-called meringue squares you have ever tasted. So I brought over a huge batch to Miss Hepburn, and she said, she looked in the box, she said, oh my, they look fascinating. And her maid was practically thrown down the stairs to go warm them up. They were brought back up. She literally downed 40 of them.
40 meringue
40
cookies?
of them. She said, I've never had anything like them. And there was one left. And I said, why don't you have it? You seem to like them. And she said, we'll split it. And she said, could I have the recipe? So my grandmother sent her the recipe. My grandmother got a beautiful note back from Katharine Hepburn thanking her, and she's passed out the recipe to everybody. And now Family Circle magazine is going to print the recipe as Katharine Hepburn's favorite cookie recipe.
Well, you know, it's funny. I have in my recipe box from, it must be 5 years ago, I read an article on Katharine Hepburn, and they had Katharine Hepburn's brownie recipe in it. And I have that. You can tell her, and it's great. It's one of this gooey mass of chocolate. What else is coming up? What are you going to be doing in the coming months?
I'm also doing an interview with Joan Kennedy. I'm covering the whole Kennedy family one by one. I'm doing one with Joan Kennedy and all three of her children up at Hyannisport. And I'm very pale. I need a little sun, so that'll be a good, a healthy interview, right?
Is it hard for you to do the research? Because I would think when you go in, you say, I want to ask a question that's never been asked and get an answer that's never been printed.
Well, with this particular interview, she's already told me what she will talk about. Two things, the two M's, motherhood and music. She has a great interest in classical music, and because I was a musician and wrote the book about Horowitz, so, you know, we're connected in that way. And she won't talk about her divorce, her alcoholism, or anything else.
So within those parameters, you have to come out with something new and exciting.
Motherhood covers a lot of ground, though, doesn't it?
Well, you've got a lot of things to look forward to on the newsstand this summer. As we said, really, it's a Father's Day interview with Edward Kennedy, and it comes out June 15th. And that'll be in Ladies' Home Journal. In July, pick up M Magazine. And it's really a beautiful issue of M. It has lots of interesting things. William Paley from CBS. August is Cosmopolitan with Grant Ticker. And then in September's Family Circle, Lena Horne.
That ought to cover it, I think.
I think that ought to cover it. Thanks, Glenn, for being with us.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back. Stay with us.